Welcome to Seneca Lake Mysteries. In this episode, I'll be introducing this new podcast and covering some intriguing and wild stories, including a search for hidden gold, giant whirlpools, bizarre creatures by the railroad tracks, April Fool's Day terror on the water, a missing piece from a forgotten manuscript, and much more. So let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome to Seneca Lake Mysteries, the podcast exploring the unusual, strange, and unexplained on New York's largest Finger Lake. My name's Jim Meany, and I've spent the past decade or so researching and collecting unusual, strange, and unexplained stories from the Seneca Lake region. Not just, supernatural paranormal topics like lake monsters and UFOs and ghosts, but also myths, legends, and curious or out of the ordinary history, people, and places in the area. I'm lining up some great guests for the show in the coming weeks, and a new episode will be released on the 7th, 17th, and 27th of every month. If you have any feedback or questions, or you have your own stories you'd like to share, or maybe be a guest on the show, you can get hold of me by sending an email to podcast@SenecaLakeMysteries.com or calling the Seneca Lake Mysteries hotline and leaving a voicemail. And that number is 607-307-1167. Now, I moved to the Geneva area. Actually, I moved to the city of Geneva in 2013. In 2014, I was in the midst of organizing a monthly art and culture event, a First Friday event in downtown Geneva. And I was looking for themes. Each month would have a specific theme, whether it was a holiday that month or the season. And as I was researching themes, I came across a story of the Seneca Lake Monster. And I was really excited to find out about it because cryptozoology and the unexplained have been interests of mine since I was a kid. So I registered the website domain SenecalakeMonster.com and kind of put it on the shelf and figured I'd revisit it later. And then in 2015, it ended up being kind of the year of the lake monster. I proposed an amendment to the city of Geneva's city council to prohibit hunting, trapping, and harming the Seneca Lake monster. That was approved by a 6-1 vote by city council. And that's now a law in Geneva. The same year, in July, I organized the Seneca Lake Monster edition of the First Friday art event. There was an art contest, a showing of the Exploring Seneca documentary about the Seneca Lake Monster, and it was a super successful event. Shortly after that was the annual Geneva Fireman's Parade, and there was a lake monster float in the parade. Around the same time, I was contacted by New Yorker magazine, and they were doing a short documentary about Seneca Lake, and I had the opportunity to be part of that short documentary talking about the lake monster and the Seneca Lake drums. So I continued looking into Seneca Lake drums, UFO sightings, which led me to different ghost stories and hauntings, the history of the Willard Asylum, military presence on Seneca Lake. So that I was researching these subjects and collecting these stories just sort of as a hobby, something I was interested in. At the same time, I started writing a political blog about local government in 2016, right around the time the First Friday event was kind of reached its end. And when I got close, when the blog also ran its course in 2021, I ended the blog, and by March of 2022, I launched Seneca Lake Mysteries, launched the website, and put a call out to the public about the project and asked the public to send me stories for inclusion in a possible book or some other kind of effort in the future, which turns out to be this podcast. Just to clarify, I picked the name Seneca Lake Mysteries after a lot of thought. Had trouble thinking of an exact word that would describe everything that I kind of want to cover with the project. So the term Seneca Lake Mysteries might be a little deceptive to some people. It's not a true crime podcast. I'm not looking to debunk or prove any of the stories that we talk about. Even though they're mysteries, I'm not looking to necessarily solve these mysteries. It's just an opportunity to just talk about these stories, kind of engage our imagination and have some fun and see where it goes. One thing I am going to stay away from is if I find out a story is a hoax, if I find something that's, known to have been faked, I won't be covering those kind of stories on the podcast. So I will be covering a lot of the more well-known stories, like I mentioned earlier, the Seneca Lake Monster, Willard Asylum, the military history in the area, Seneca White Deer, UFO sightings, some of the more famous haunted locations in the area. But also I've got a lot of stories ready for you that you probably haven't heard before. And some of them are pretty out there, pretty bananas. And the stories will range from, being a fascinating kind of local trivia. Wow, I didn't really know that, to the other end of the spectrum, which is like, holy cow, that's the most bonkers thing I've ever heard. So I'm really excited to get the show going. As far as where I've gathered these sources from, a lot of publications, newspapers, books, online articles, but also stories that people have told me themselves, firsthand accounts. Some of those stories, if I can get these people to agree to come on the podcast, they'll be coming on the podcast. Otherwise, I'll just recount the stories that they've told to me. And each episode, I plan to cover multiple different stories per episode. So if you tune in and you're hearing a story about whatever UFOs and it doesn't interest you that much, just hang around and I'm sure I'll be hitting some other stories that might interest you moving along. So yeah, I'm really excited to get this going. I want to thank you so much for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe, tell your friends, let everybody know you can get the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. Sign up for the email list at SenecaLakeMysteries.com. That's actually the best way, not only to know when a new podcast is coming out, but also any other updates or events or things I have going on. And of course, you can always call the phone number and yeah, let me know what's going on. That this show is going to depend on you, the listener, and I see it more as a community kind of effort. Not just folks who live in the area, but anyone who just has interest in these kind of subjects and in the Seneca Lake area. So thanks again for listening. And I've got first segment that I want to do next is going to focus primarily on the lake itself, the physical features of the lake, and sort of describing the setting of Seneca Lake and what makes it so unique and different from other places in the world. The place that is the setting for all these stories we're going to be exploring. So yeah, thanks for listening, and let's go. So before we get into the unexplained and unusual places, events, people, and legends from the Seneca Lake area, let's take a look at the lake itself and the surrounding landscape that provides the backdrop and atmosphere for these stories. So for starters, Seneca Lake is the deepest freshwater lake in the United States, east of the Mississippi River, not including the Great Lakes. Another way to say that would be that Seneca Lake's the deepest freshwater lake in the U.S., east of the Mississippi River, contained within the borders of the United States. So in other words, you can travel from Wisconsin to Louisiana to Florida to Maine and everywhere in between, and you will not find a deeper lake than Seneca Lake. It's one of the 11 Finger Lakes in upstate New York, which were once a series of north-flowing streams before advancing and retreating glaciers carved out the landscape, and it became ice-free about 14,000 years ago. The lakes they're laid out, arranged side by side along a roughly 70-mile stretch of land, about 30 miles south of Lake Ontario, with Seneca Lake approximately in the center, which has earned it the rascally nickname, the middle finger. So with a maximum depth of 618 feet, an average depth of 281 feet, and a maximum width of about 3 miles, Seneca Lake accounts for about half of the total water held in all 11 long, narrow Finger Lakes. So 618 feet. How deep is 618 feet? Well, you could place Seattle, Washington's Space Needle or Washington, D.C.'s Washington Monument at the deepest point of Seneca Lake, and both of those monuments would be completely submerged. I don't know why you would want to do that, but researchers have also estimated that the original depth of the lake was more than double the current measurement. So there's supposedly an estimated 800 feet of sediment at the bottom of the lake, and that's believed to hold a 12,500 year sedimentary record. So if you're opposed to placing the Washington Monument at the bottom of Seneca Lake, you can rest easy because it probably wouldn't work because it would just sink into the muddy sediment. The main tributaries on Seneca Lake are Catherine Creek at the southern end and the Cayuga Lake outlet, which flows into Seneca Lake near Dresden on the western shore, right about the midpoint of the lake, of Seneca Lake. There are dozens of smaller streams that empty into the lake and plenty of waterfalls not far from Seneca shores. Now, the Finger Lakes are well known for the number of waterfalls that it has. And for me, there's something really special about waterfalls and the benefits, the healing power that they have. They're known to have psychological and physiological benefits. They help alleviate mental fatigue, reducing stress and anxiety. And it's also said that the negative ions that are released by cascading water can increase serotonin levels in the brain. So not only are waterfalls beautiful and relaxing, but they can really alter your state of awareness. And there are quite a few of these waterfalls around Seneca Lake. There's even a stream that's named 16 Falls Creek, to give you kind of an idea of just how many falls there are around here. Now, the tallest waterfall in the Seneca Lake area is Aunt Sarah's Falls, or Aunt Sarah's Falls, depending on how you pronounce it, in the village of Montour Falls, which is a total of around 200 feet, maybe a little bit more, although only the bottom 90 to 100 feet is visible from the ground. So that's also one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite waterfalls in the area, and probably my favorite waterfall around Seneca Lake, because you can look at it and it's visible from the road, but you're only seeing about a third of it. So that kind of gives it an air of mystery. You're not seeing the whole lake. So that kind of gives it an air of mystery. You're not seeing the whole waterfall. And also, it's my favorite waterfall because the legends surrounding it. One local legend said that it got its name, Aunt Sarah's Falls. It was named after a woman who was an Indian, a wife of an early settler in the area, who jumped to her death from the falls. However, the legend that I really get a kick out of is that at one time there was supposedly a rock carving of an Indian woman's face near the base of the falls that was destroyed by men who believed that there was gold hidden behind it. Now, that's a delightful story on a couple of levels. One, because of this idea of a rock carving of a face, you'd be hard-pressed to find any history of indigenous native people in North America making rock carvings of faces. And not only that, the idea that there was a treasure of gold hidden behind this carving just makes it a real neat little story. The next tallest waterfall is Hector Falls at 165 feet in the town of Hector on the east side of the lake, followed by Chiquagua Falls, also in Montour Falls, at 156 feet. Now, the cool thing is all three of these falls, Aunt Sarah's Falls, Hector Falls, and Chiquagua Falls, are all easily viewable to the public with parking right next to the falls. You can visit any of these falls at any time, although the best time to visit is after a good amount of rain. Now, there are other big ones, Silver Thread Falls in Lodi, 150 feet, Glenora Falls in Glenora on the west side of the lake, right around 100 feet. And of course, Watkins Glen State Park has a total of 19 waterfalls. The tallest one is about 60 feet. The smallest ones are just a few feet high. And these 19 waterfalls drop a combined 400 feet down the gorge. And this gorge has 200-foot walls. Watkins Glen, I'm stating the obvious, but if you haven't been to Watkins Glen, you got to go there. You got to see it. It is a truly otherworldly place. And we're very lucky to have it here near Seneca Lake. Now, at the northern end of Seneca Lake, near Geneva, the lake flows out into the Seneca River, which became part of the Erie Canal system in the early 1800s, which directly connected Seneca Lake with the Hudson River and the Atlantic Ocean, which means you can get to anywhere in the world by boat from Seneca Lake. Now, the lake is also believed to be fed by underground springs at an astonishing rate of 328 gallons per minute. And due to the lake's depth and its constantly circulating waters, the temperature at approximately 100 feet deep remains at around 39-40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, which prevents it from ever fully freezing over, except for a handful of known recorded cases. Last time was 1912, also happened in 1855, 1875, and 1885. Now, Seneca Lake's warm water temperature acts as a heat source and creates a unique microclimate over the hills and fields surrounding the lake, which extends the growing season, making it ideal for growing grapes and other fruit, as evidenced by the large number of vineyards and wineries that surround the shores today. And it's not just the microclimate combined with the soils, and the terrain. Seneca Lake is actually one of the most unique and ideal spots in the world for grape production. And within that microclimate is an area on the southeastern shore of Seneca Lake that's known as the Banana Belt. It's next to some of the deepest parts of the lake, and the way the afternoon sun hits the area can sometimes mean a 5 or 10 degree difference in temperature from the surrounding area. So when you're just talking about the natural features of the lake, you have all these waterfalls that kind of put you in a different state of consciousness, and you have areas where the weather is literally different from the weather just a few miles away. So it really creates an atmosphere that feels like a different kind of place. Now, there has been some research done into the action of the water under the surface on Seneca Lake. It has unique underwater wave phenomenon. In 1977, Dr. William F. Arnsbrock, a professor at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, headed up a research effort into these underwater waves, which he referred to as internal undular surges. Now, interestingly, Dr. Arnsbrock concluded that these surges also existed in the world's oceans and in Scotland's Loch Ness, the purported home of the world's most famous lake monster, Nessie. Dr. Arnsbrock even traveled to Loch Ness to learn all he could about the lake and about long, narrow, deep bodies of water in general. And he observed that Loch Ness does look like Seneca Lake a bit, but it's slightly narrower at 1.7 miles, shorter at 22.5 miles, and deeper, 755 feet. But they do share many of the same characteristics. Arnsbrock also noted that the underwater waves in Loch Ness bounce back and forth, unlike Seneca Lake, due to Loch Ness's narrower width. Dr. Arnsbrock also stated that he did not see any lake monsters on his trip to Scotland, nor apparently in Seneca Lake. Now, more recently in 2021, a team of researchers funded by Le Moyne College in Syracuse, New York, conducted an experiment to track deep currents in Seneca Lake. They used 3 buoys attached to drogues at depths of 4 feet, 30 feet, and 100 feet. And their study showed active currents under the surface of Seneca Lake, which reversed approximately every 26 hours. And underwater whirlpools with a diameter of up to 1 mile rotating downstream of several headlands. Headlands are also referred to as points, like Lodi Point, just land masses that kind of jut outward into the lake. So even just looking at the work of Dr. Arnsbrock back in the 70s and the Le Moyne-funded team in recent years and others, we see that it's pretty clearly established that the waters below the surface of Seneca Lake are dynamic and active, and they add yet another distinct layer of uniqueness to Seneca Lake. Now, although the waters of Seneca Lake are usually fairly calm, local residents and visitors acknowledge and respect the occasional danger and power the lake exhibits. The wave patterns are more similar to the Great Lakes or the ocean than some of the smaller lakes that people encounter in the Northeast, and conditions can turn pretty quickly. There are newspaper accounts from the 19th century until the present day that detail dozens, if not hundreds, of accidental drownings on Seneca Lake, which I'm not going to get into. That's a pretty dark subject, but especially in the late 19th century, early 20th century, it was not uncommon for 10 people to drown in Seneca Lake every year or more. Now, a great number of those occurrences are due to the lake's tendency to rapidly change from gently rolling tides to rumbling, treacherous waves. And there's one story from 1950 that kind of illustrates how Seneca Lake's conditions can change very quickly. I call this one the April Fool's Greyhound Lake Assault. So back on April Fool's Day of 1950, 38 passengers inside a stalled Greyhound bus got an up-close look at exactly how violent the lake could be. So it was about 2 miles east of Geneva along a stretch of routes 5 and 20 where Seneca Lake State Park now sits. Multiple automobiles had stalled along that highway throughout the day because of heavy rains and storms and standing water on the roadway, which ran right along the northern shore. So this bus, which was en route from Rochester to Syracuse, was filled with passengers and had conked out right along that same stretch where the roadway was submerged under 8 inches of water. According to witnesses, a powerful south wind was generating waves that were around 14 feet high, which repeatedly slammed into the side of the bus. The waves struck the side of the bus with such force that water was seeping through the windows, passengers were screaming in terror, and the bus sat there for about an hour before a tow truck finally arrived on the scene to move the Greyhound and all its traumatized riders to safety. Now, if it seems like 14 feet high is unrealistic for Seneca Lake, they probably weren't 14-foot waves. The waves on Seneca Lake can probably get up to, 6-8 feet high. But when they hit that seawall, that concrete rock seawall that's at the northern end of the lake, when they strike that seawall, it kind of throws the water up high. And you can see it when there are storms in the area, especially on super windy days. So it's possible. I mean, a Greyhound bus is about 12 feet high, at least Greyhound buses back at that time. So 14 feet waves or water splashing into the side of the bus isn't impossible. So yeah, Seneca Lake and the area around it is not like any other place in the world. It sort of has its own weather, has places like Watkins Glen and Excelsior Glen that you can walk into and feel like you're in a different place and time. The lake is extraordinarily deep and unpredictable and beautiful. There's probably a lot more details and unique aspects and features I could talk about, but that's kind of the basics, kind of covers the most notable things about the Seneca Lake area. So I decided to tell this story on the first episode of the podcast for several reasons. I received this back in October of 2022, just a few months after I had launched the project and asked people to send their stories and their feedback. Most of the feedback I got, folks told me their name, and I was able to reply and discuss whatever they wanted to discuss, whatever experience they wanted to share. But I received one that was anonymous, and it's really a very bizarre story. And because it was sent in through the contact form on my website, there's no way for me to reply and ask any follow-up questions. But it's such a weird story, and it's stuck with me for the past couple of years. So why not put it here in the first episode of the Seneca Lake Mysteries podcast? So it says here, the date of the sighting, 2009 through 2020, maybe, question mark. Location of the sighting, Geneva, New York, mainly near train tracks. So that covers a pretty broad area from the city of Geneva into the town of Geneva. It says number of witnesses are 2. So the person describes the experience in the following way. Quote, I spotted the first one when I was maybe 5 or 6. I was eating breakfast with my family when I heard a weird sound from the hall. I looked over and there was a black cat with no face. It wasn't like the face was ripped off or something. It was just flat where it should be. Also, this was at a time when we didn't have any cats. I pointed it out to my parents who went to check, but it was gone. Over the years, I saw a few more of these cats. Some in my house or in a woods where a rail used to run. They can be any color or breed and often seem completely normal aside from the fact that they don't have a face. Occasionally, however, they have slightly distorted features, like a tail that seems a bit too long for a cat or ears that are too long and skinny, or even looking like a photo someone tried to stretch. For years, I thought I was just seeing things. They tend to vanish very quickly, or they were just cats who were sick or had weirdly fluffy faces. But a few years ago, in 2020, I think, I was walking with a friend. We passed over a train track, and they mentioned that sometimes they saw weird faceless cats along it. I asked them for more info, and they sounded exactly like what I saw. There's been a few more people who claimed to see them, but those people only said so after I had already mentioned them, so they could have been lying. I've tried researching, but I haven't found anything else about it. So all I really know is they like trains, and they act like completely normal cats. They won't act sick. They seem to be able to see despite having no eyes. And I think I've even heard them meow despite no mouth. But as soon as you take your eyes off of them, they're gone. End quote. Okay, so I think that the average person, or just speaking for myself, when you're walking near a railroad track or outdoor somewhere and you see a cat, my first instinct is, oh, it's a cat. I wonder if it will come near me. I wonder if it wants to be pet. I wonder if it will meow at me. But it's a good feeling. It's a joyful feeling almost for me. I'm seeing a cat when I didn't expect to see one. So to go from that to getting a closer look at a cat and realizing that it has no face on it, that's just really unsettling to me. Now, I've looked into and researched to see if there are legends or myths or stories of cryptids that involve faceless animals, cats or otherwise, and I haven't really found anything. There are various legends about faceless humanoids and people and ghosts, but not animals. If you know of any stories, send them in. Let me know, because I am very curious about this. But also, cats, seeing a cat without a face is extraordinarily weird. But seeing that same cat and realizing that it has distorted features, a tail that's too long for a cat, ears that are too long and skinny, or looking like a photo that someone tried to stretch. You go from being creepy and scary to a whole other level of insane bending of reality. And if that's not enough, these cats appear to be able to see without having eyes or meow without a mouth. And they seem to literally vanish as soon as you glance away. They're gone. So for the past couple of years, I've been keeping my eyes open when I'm around the railroad tracks near Geneva. And now I'm asking you, has anyone out there seen anything like this? Ever seen a faceless cat in Geneva or anywhere else, or any kind of faceless animal? Let me know. Send an email, podcast@SenecaLakeMysteries.com, or leave a voicemail at 607-307-1167. I'd like to learn more. Oh, and if you're the person who wrote this email, reach out to me. I'd like to know if you've seen any more of them or if anyone else has seen them. And you know what I realized is that the words face and cat share a synonym. And that synonym would be puss. So maybe I call this the story of the pussless puss, or the puss without a puss. I don't know. Let me know what you think. So I'd like to start by giving you a little background about how the final story of the first episode of the podcast, ended up being the final story of the first episode of the podcast. So in recent weeks, I was putting together and planning this podcast, and I had the stories that I wanted to feature, but I felt like I'd need a little bit more, and I wasn't sure what would be the best story that would fit kind of the theme of the first episode. And I was kind of not really struggling with it. I just felt like I'd kind of hit a wall. And right around that time, I happened to be online, and I collect memorabilia and other items related to Seneca Lake, especially its weird history. And I came across an old manuscript for sale. Now, I call it a manuscript because that's what it was described as online, and it's 3 sheets of lined 5-inch by 8-inch writing paper. And it's an essay that was written over 100 years ago, likely in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the name of the essay is Seneca Lake and Its Surroundings. Now, there is no information about who wrote this, exactly when it was written, the person's age, anything. It's just 3 pages of writing in cursive. Looks like the author used a fountain pen. So in and of itself, this manuscript is a mystery. And its title is Seneca Lake and Its Surroundings. So a guy like me, in the way I think, I look at this manuscript and say, here's my final story for the podcast. I'm now the owner of the manuscript, and I am going to post a link to the manuscript on SenecaLakeMysteries.com, and I'll put it in the description of this podcast. But what adds another layer of mystery to this manuscript is the final 8 lines that are written on the 3rd page at the end of the essay are actually a poem. And in that 8-line poem, in the 7th line of the poem, the edge of the page was worn away or torn away, and there's a word missing. And as I read the poem, I'm not sure what that missing word is. So I'm going to throw it out to everyone here and see if anyone has any idea what this mysterious missing word in the poem may be. So I'm going to read the entire manuscript here. I also want to mention that it looks like it may have been a school assignment, whether high school or college, no idea. But there are some lines that seem to have been edited, crossed out with pencil, and then corrected in the margins. And also on the first page, written in pencil, are the numbers 350. Kind of looks like a 3.50, but I can't tell. So after this was written, some kind of changes were made to it. It looks like that might be a grade. But the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to read the original essay that was written in pen by the original author. Author unknown. Seneca Lake and its surroundings. Seneca Lake, lying in its serene beauty pillowed among the gentle undulating hills, is about 40 miles long and from 1 to nearly 5 miles wide. It is a current opinion among the people that the bottom of the lake has never been found, but this is contradicted by others who state the depth of the deepest place, which is about 600 feet. The lake is fed by numerous springs and streams of water, which wind their way down through many a meadow scene, and at last leap the rock-clefted shore to rest in the arms of the deep. Its waters are of a moderate temperature and very clear, ever changing in hue to correspond with the overbending skies, but always beautiful, affording an unwearying view to the eye. These pure deep waters abound in trout and bass, which afford both pleasure and labor to the fishermen living near the shore. Many beautiful little towns and villages are pleasantly situated on the banks of the lovely Seneca, among which are Watkins, a place known through its glen, which is famed for its marvelous scenery; North Hector, a favorite resort for picnickers; Willard, where is located the Willard Insane Asylum; Glenora, Lodi, Peach Orchard, Long Point, and Geneva, the largest place, a city. Many of the people living near the lake are engaged in tilling the soil and cultivating the garden and orchard and the vine, which yield their fruits in abundance. In the summer, gay parties of pleasure seekers may be seen camping along the shore of the lake, waking the echoes with song and laughter. Affording an interesting diversion to the calm of the lake are the steamers, together with many smaller boats which ply the lake. A moonlight ride on the Seneca, with the gold sheen on the water, is not to be forgotten. Now this is the end of the essay with the poem. Oh, would I might rest when my soul departs, where those clustering lilies blow, and Seneca's rose on the towering cliffs hangs over the wave below, or here the crystal gleams in the lake so pure, like virtue in a humble soul, and victor waves with thunders against the rock walls roll. Now, at the end of the poem there, after the word thunders, that's where the paper is torn. I'm not sure what the extra word would be there. If everything is rhyming, which it doesn't necessarily do, then it would say, and victor waves with thunders sure. It would rhyme with pure. But the lines in the previous verse don't. The first and third rhymes in the previous verse don't rhyme. So it doesn't necessarily have to rhyme there. Where the crystal gleams in the lake so pure, like virtue in a humble soul, and victor waves with thunders against the rock walls roll. What is that extra word, folks? I'm not sure what it is. Let me know what you think. Now, I realize that I said earlier that this podcast isn't about solving a mystery, and this kind of is about solving a mystery. The mystery of the missing word in the mystery manuscript. So, yeah, sorry if anyone feels misled. I just love this essay and wanted to share it. And that's it. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember, new episodes on the 7th, 17th, and 27th of every month. Again, I really appreciate you listening, and I really appreciate if you share this podcast with others. Thanks again. Until next time.